Once again, the Queen of Consorts surprises us, but not in a good way.
Made lurid and false claims about the royal family, which played on her fears and fueled paranoia.
The order of the Garter ceremony was meant to display unity, tradition, and royal discipline. Instead, one unexpected jewel brought the procession to a stunning halt. As Queen Camilla stepped forward wearing Queen Elizabeth's Cartier Tiara, Prince William's expression changed instantly. Then came the gesture no one expected. He raised his hand, stopped the ceremony in front of stunned guests, and forced the royal family to confront a question the palace had tried desperately to avoid. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William had entered prepared to stand beside King Charles and protect the dignity of one of the crown's oldest rituals. The Order of the Garter is Britain's highest order of chivalry, a royal institution built around loyalty, rank, and centuries of symbolism. Every robe, position, jewel, and movement carried meaning, which was why the prince noticed the tiara before others dared to react. Camilla moved toward her assigned place with confidence, but the Cartier piece changed the mood instantly. Within the family, that tiara belonged to Queen Elizabeth's private legacy, not to the Queen Consort's approved ceremonial collection. Princess Anne recognized it. Catherine recognized it. Charles recognized it too, and the king's silence told William this was no harmless mistake. The prince's jaw tightened. Catherine understood that his anger came from grief as much as protocol. To him, the diamonds represented his grandmother's wishes, her memory, and a boundary crossed without permission. Then William raised his gloved hand and ordered the procession to stop before Camilla could take another step. Camilla froze. Humiliation replaced confidence as attendants, officials, Anne, Catherine, and Charles turned toward her. The future king did not accuse her. He asked one question: who authorized the tiara's removal from the protected royal collection? No one answered. The keeper of the jewels, the official responsible for guarding and recording the monarchy's most valuable pieces, lowered his eyes when Anne looked at him. A senior aide approached William and whispered that the tiara had been released under an emergency verbal instruction hours earlier. The record contained no authorizing name. That transformed the moment from a jewelry dispute into a possible breach of royal authority. William declared that the ceremony would remain suspended until the tiara was removed and the access record placed in his hands. Camilla's face hardened. She understood that the missing name could expose far more than one forbidden jewel. But before William could discover who placed the tiara on Camilla's head, he first had to face the personal loyalties that made this confrontation far more dangerous than anyone watching could understand. The ceremony had stopped, but the real conflict was not taking place beneath ceremonial banners. It was unfolding inside three people, bound together by duty, marriage, grief, and years of unspoken resentment. William believed he was defending the late queen's wishes. Camilla believed she was being publicly stripped of legitimacy. Charles stood between his wife and his heir, knowing that whichever side he chose would expose the fracture hidden beneath the crown. William entered the side chamber and removed his ceremonial gloves one finger at a time. Catherine stayed close, watching the anger in him slowly give way to pain. Queen Elizabeth had been more than a grandmother during the hardest years of his childhood. She had represented safety, order, and permanence when his private world felt unstable. Her jewelry, therefore, carried emotional weight far beyond its value, especially when her written wishes appeared to be quietly ignored. The prince finally admitted what had shaken him. Seeing the Cartier tiara on Camilla felt like watching his grandmother's private legacy being claimed without permission. Catherine understood why he had stopped the procession, yet she also knew the decision had placed him in direct conflict with both the Queen Consort and the king. William had defended one bond, but he may have damaged another. Camilla sat in another chamber while an attendant waited in silence. She refused to touch the tiara. After years of public judgment, she had come to see access to major royal jewels as proof that her position beside Charles was accepted and permanent. Being ordered to remove one before the household felt like more than a correction. To her, it felt like rejection. The Queen Consort's anger quickly hardened into fear. She told the attendant that William had chosen the most humiliating moment possible to challenge her. Yet Camilla's deepest concern was not the prince. It was Charles. If the monarch refused to defend her, the ceremony would reveal that her title did not protect her from the family's private boundaries. Charles received the preliminary withdrawal record minutes later. The record was the official entry showing who requested a royal jewel and under whose authority it was released. He read 2 lines, placed the paper face down, and said nothing. His silence carried dread, not confusion. The king appeared to recognize the wording used in the authorization. Anne then joined William and confirmed that the Cartier Tiara had never been part of Camilla's approved ceremonial rotation. The Princess Royal had personally reviewed Queen Elizabeth's jewelry instructions and remembered a special restriction attached to that piece. Catherine noticed something even more troubling. Charles did not question whether the restriction existed. He only asked who else had seen the record. William immediately demanded the original inventory note written after his grandmother's death. Anne warned him that the note had disappeared once before. After a private confrontation, no one outside the family had ever learned about. The tiara had not appeared by accident, and the first attempt to claim it had begun months earlier, during a private ceremony that would later be remembered as the true point of no return. Long before William lifted his hand at the order of the Garter, the Cartier Tiara had already become the center of a silent royal struggle. The first confrontation happened behind closed doors, without cameras, crowds, or ceremonial music. Only 4 people were present. 1 request was made. 1 refusal followed. And when Camilla left the room that night, she carried neither the jewel nor the approval she wanted, but she did carry a determination that would eventually stop an ancient ceremony. Anne had taken control of a private review after Queen Elizabeth's death. The keeper of the jewels, the official responsible for recording, protecting, and releasing royal pieces, worked beside her as each item was placed into one of 4 groups: ceremonial use, permanent display, family inheritance, or restricted preservation. The Cartier Tiara entered the final category until William and Catherine could decide its future within the family. Camilla discovered the restriction while her staff prepared jewelry choices for a major diplomatic reception. She noticed the Cartier piece listed apart from the others and immediately asked why the reigning queen could not wear something held inside the crown's collection. To her, the separation felt deliberate. It suggested that her title could open palace doors, yet still leave the most meaningful symbols beyond her reach. The private review at Windsor became the point of no return. Camilla asked Anne to release the tiara for the reception. The Princess Royal refused, opened the inventory book, and read Queen Elizabeth's handwritten instruction aloud. The jewel was to remain untouched until William approved its future family use. Camilla's anger broke through. She accused Anne of using their mother's memory to limit her authority. The princess closed the book and answered that respecting a written wish was not an insult to Camilla. Ignoring it, she said, would be an insult to the late queen. Charles entered after hearing their raised voices. Camilla turned to him and demanded a direct answer. Did his wife truly need William's permission to wear a royal jewel? The king hesitated. He spoke about patience, family feeling, and avoiding unnecessary conflict, but he never answered her question. His silence left Camilla feeling abandoned and convinced Anne that the danger had not passed. That same evening, the Queen Consort's office requested a duplicate inventory note from the Royal Archive, the secure record system holding official palace documents. The request disappeared 20 minutes later, yet a junior clerk preserved the digital entry. Weeks afterward, Anne discovered the original restriction missing from the working file. She replaced it with a certified copy and warned William through a documented private briefing that someone was testing whether Queen Elizabeth's boundaries could be erased through procedure. Then came the morning of the ceremony. Camilla's dresser received a sealed case with one verbal message: His Majesty has approved the selection. Charles would later insist those words were never his. When William entered the chamber to demand the truth, the question was no longer whether Camilla knew the tiara was restricted, it was whether she had knowingly used the king's name to obtain it. The public saw a halted ceremony. Behind a locked door, the royal family faced something far more volatile. William entered the chamber with the withdrawal record in his hand. Camilla remained seated beneath the Cartier diamonds. Charles stood between them, visibly shaken. There were no spectators to impress, and no officials to blame. When the prince finally spoke, his words were quiet, direct, and devastating. The tiara had to come off immediately. Catherine entered beside William, while Anne followed carrying the certified copy of Queen Elizabeth's restriction. The robing chamber, a private room where senior royals prepare for ceremonial appearances, had become the center of a crisis. Attendants were ordered to remain outside. Inside, every person understood that the next few minutes could damage the family far more than the public delay already had. William placed the withdrawal record beside Anne's copy. He explained that the jewelry office had released the tiara after receiving an oral instruction presented as the king's direct command. The ceremony would remain suspended until someone accepted responsibility. Then the prince looked at Camilla and said, "You knew this piece was restricted. Take it off." Camilla rose at once. She answered that he had no right to command the queen in front of her husband. The queen consort then turned to Charles and demanded that he confirm her authority. For one painful moment, the monarch said nothing. When he finally spoke, he admitted that he had never personally approved the Cartier tiara. Betrayal replaced Camilla's anger. She realized the king would not defend the version of events given to the jewelry staff. Desperate to regain control, she dismissed the restriction as outdated sentiment. That was when William's restraint broke. He told her the instruction carried his grandmother's signature, and that treating it as sentiment was exactly why the procession had been stopped. Camilla denied ordering anyone to use Charles's name. Her private secretary was called inside and gave a recorded account of what had happened. The secretary said the verbal authorization came from a senior household coordinator who claimed to be carrying out the queen consort's personal request. Anne immediately asked who had instructed the coordinator. A message log showed a call from Camilla's private sitting room shortly before the jewelry vault opened. The Princess Royal pressed for an answer, but the Queen insisted she had not been alone in the room. That single detail shifted suspicion toward someone inside her closest household circle. Charles removed his ceremonial chain and set it heavily on the table. He ordered every access record sealed and every message preserved. The king was no longer trying to calm a family argument. He was opening an inquiry into his own wife's office. Yet sealing the records did not answer the most dangerous question, because inside the monarchy, controlling a jewel was never only about possession. It was about who had the power to command in the sovereign's name. The Cartier tiara had passed through locked doors, guarded corridors, and layers of royal authority. It could not simply be borrowed. Someone had understood the system well enough to make an unauthorized request appear legitimate, and that knowledge pointed toward the heart of palace power. As officials traced the command, William discovered that stopping the ceremony had challenged more than Camilla's jewelry choice. It had disrupted an emerging network built around access, influence, and the king's increasingly fragile authority. William studied the access chain and saw how carefully the request had moved. Royal jewelry required recorded approval, secure transport, condition checks, and one named person accepting responsibility. A verbal instruction could speed that process only when staff believed it came directly from the sovereign. That was why the false authority mattered. It had not bypassed the system through force. It had entered through trust. Charles felt the accusation before the prince finished speaking. Since the king's health pressures had increased, Camilla's household had taken on more scheduling and ceremonial coordination. That support had slowly blurred into something more dangerous. Certain aides were no longer simply helping the monarch. They were speaking as though proximity to his private rooms gave them the right to act in his name. William refused to soften the warning. He told his father that loyalty to the crown could not mean obeying whoever spoke most confidently from the royal apartments. The prince argued that a system built on assumptions would eventually collapse, because staff would stop asking whether an instruction was lawful and begin asking only whether refusal might cause offense. Charles reacted with visible pain. Alone with Anne, he admitted that exposing the abuse could humiliate Camilla. Yet ignoring it would prove that his authority could be borrowed without consequence. The Princess Royal answered that silence would not protect the Queen Consort. It would only teach her household that boundaries carried no real weight. The king sat at his desk with the access log before him. He reached for a pen, stopped, and looked toward Anne. His hand trembled because the decisive order had to come from him, not William. Then, Charles signed a temporary suspension, preventing Camilla's household from authorizing any jewelry movement. The inquiry soon identified the senior coordinator who relayed the request. In a recorded internal interview, the official said Camilla had asked whether the Cartier Tiara could be made available, but she had never ordered anyone to use the king's name. A second aide had turned that question into approval. The staff member admitted, through a documented statement, that everyone understood the Queen Consort expected results rather than objections. Camilla's wishes had become commands before she ever spoke them plainly. William then found the same informal chain attached to two earlier requests, involving restricted rooms and private royal records. By the time the ceremony resumed, the Cartier Tiara had been returned, but Camilla's place inside the palace had already begun to change in ways no removed jewel could conceal. 37 minutes after William stopped the Order of the Garter, the doors opened again. The procession resumed, the music returned, and the ancient ceremony moved forward, as though royal discipline had restored order. But one absence spoke louder than any announcement. Camilla did not return wearing another tiara. She did not return at all. Behind the ceremonial calm, a new reality had taken hold. The Queen Consort had been removed from the moment meant to affirm her place. Charles had already signed the temporary restriction, and the Cartier Tiara was returned to secure custody. Officials then prepared a smaller approved jewel, hoping Camilla would rejoin the ceremony without creating another delay. The replacement mattered because ceremonial jewelry is never treated as decoration alone. It signals rank, trust, and official acceptance inside the royal household. William refused to move forward until he received written confirmation that Queen Elizabeth's instruction had been restored to the central inventory. The inventory is the official record showing how royal possessions may be used and who may authorize access. The prince also demanded that no future change could be made without approval from the sovereign, Anne, and himself. Camilla looked at the replacement jewel and closed the case without touching it. She said she would not return, looking as though she had accepted a public reprimand. The Queen Consort removed her ceremonial mantle, dismissed her attendants, and made her decision clear. Charles asked her to reconsider for the sake of unity. Camilla answered that unity had vanished when he allowed William to order her to remove the tiara. The king replied that the true boundary had been broken when his name was used without his consent. Neither raised a voice, but the pain between them was deeper than anger. Catherine joined William moments before the procession resumed. She asked whether he regretted stopping the ceremony in public. The future king admitted that he regretted the humiliation and the pain, but not the decision. She understood that protecting his grandmother's wishes had cost him another measure of trust with Charles. Anne then informed William that Camilla's household restrictions now extended beyond jewelry records. Access to selected ceremonial schedules, archive requests, and private collection inventories had also been suspended pending review. The Princess Royal warned that the consequences were no longer symbolic. A palace communications officer prepared a statement blaming a simple wardrobe adjustment. Charles refused to approve it. The monarch would not allow an official falsehood to conceal the misuse of his authority, even if the complete truth remained private. That evening, Camilla requested a meeting with William alone. No Charles, no Catherine, no aides, no secretaries. When William entered that private room, there were no robes, titles, records, or ceremonial witnesses left to protect either of them from what they had waited years to say. For years, William and Camilla had spoken through protocol, family schedules, formal smiles, and carefully managed appearances. That night, all of those protections disappeared. They met alone in a small sitting room, with the door closed and no aides waiting inside. The tiara was no longer between them, yet everything it represented remained. What followed was not another royal argument. It was a painful reckoning over grief, legitimacy, resentment, and the cost of demanding acceptance that had never been freely given. Camilla had arranged the meeting because Charles's presence would have turned it into another debate over authority and procedure. William agreed only after confirming that the Cartier Tiara had been secured, and that the inquiry would continue without interference. The investigation mattered because it would decide whether palace staff had merely misunderstood her wishes or had learned to use the king's name as a shortcut. The silence between them felt different now. Neither wore ceremonial dress, and neither had an aide ready to soften the conversation. For the first time that day, the queen consort looked tired rather than defiant. The prince looked wounded rather than furious. Without titles to hide behind, they faced the history beneath the jewel. Camilla spoke first. She told William that every major piece she wore became a public test of whether she truly belonged. The Cartier Tiara, she admitted, had come to represent acceptance in her mind. Yet she also understood that taking it without clear permission had made that acceptance impossible. William did not comfort her. He said she had repeatedly treated emotional boundaries as problems that could be negotiated away. Queen Elizabeth's instruction had not been written to humiliate Camilla. It had been written to preserve a legacy for the next generation, and the future king believed that difference mattered. The question finally came. Camilla asked whether he would ever see her as anything other than the woman connected to his mother's pain. William refused to offer forgiveness he could not honestly give. Instead, he said respect remained possible, but only if neither of them rewrote the past or claimed what had never been freely entrusted. Camilla then gave a direct account of her role. She confirmed that she had asked her staff to explore access to the tiara, but denied telling anyone to invoke Charles's name. Still, the Queen accepted responsibility for creating a household where aides believed refusal was not an acceptable answer. The turning point came quietly. Camilla agreed to sign a written acknowledgement that the jewel had been selected without proper authorization, and to surrender any future claim to it. William, in return, agreed not to demand her permanent removal from future Garter ceremonies. Before leaving, Camilla warned that the public would create its own version by morning. By sunrise, the image of William's raised hand had escaped the castle walls, and the nation was preparing to decide whether it had witnessed cruelty, courage, or the return of royal accountability. The palace had hoped the delay could be contained within ceremonial walls. It could not. By morning, William's raised hand had become the defining image of the day, and Camilla's missing place in the resumed procession had turned private conflict into national debate. Some saw an heir defending Queen Elizabeth's final wishes. Others saw a public humiliation of the king's wife. But one front page captured the moment so powerfully that even Charles could not look away. Palace officials moved quickly, releasing a carefully worded statement before speculation grew beyond control. It confirmed that the ceremony had been paused because an item from the restricted royal collection had been selected without complete authorization. A restricted collection is a group of royal possessions that cannot be used freely, even by senior family members, because special instructions govern their future. The statement also confirmed that the Cartier Tiara had been returned and that internal access procedures were under review. It did not accuse Camilla directly, yet it made one point impossible to miss. William's intervention had stopped an unauthorized act from becoming part of an official royal ceremony. Outside Windsor Castle, the reaction became deeply personal. A crowd gathered beside the Long Walk, carrying photographs of Queen Elizabeth. One elderly woman placed a small bouquet beneath the gates and told a television broadcaster he stopped the ceremony because somebody had to remember what she wanted. Her words spread within minutes. Charles faced the story alone over breakfast. A national newspaper showed William's raised hand beside Camilla's empty ceremonial place. Across the front page, the headline declared, "The line he would not let them cross." The king read it twice, folded the paper slowly, and said nothing. Commentators divided almost immediately. Supporters praised the prince for proving that written restrictions applied even to the most powerful members of the family. Critics argued that he could have challenged the decision privately, instead of allowing the queen consort's humiliation to become a global spectacle. William had defended accountability, but the cost of doing so was now being measured in public sympathy. Camilla watched the coverage with the sound muted. The queen remained still until the screen showed her empty place in the resumed procession. Then she turned away, not with anger, but with visible sadness. Her absence had become more powerful than the tiara itself. Charles finally authorized a second statement. It confirmed that the misuse of his name, not Camilla's rank, had triggered the suspension. The monarch protected the principle of royal authority while refusing to let the crisis become a permanent attack on his wife. Then the king summoned William, Camilla, Catherine, and Anne for one final meeting. There would be no more inquiry, confrontation, or negotiation. The raised hand had divided public opinion, but inside that final meeting, the family would deliver one verdict that neither loyalty nor rank could overturn. The final meeting lasted less than 20 minutes, yet it permanently changed the meaning of the halted ceremony. Charles entered carrying the restored inventory instruction. William brought no documents and made no further accusations. Camilla arrived without jewelry. Anne stood beside the locked case containing the Cartier Tiara. What followed was not a victory for one royal over another. It was a binding decision that placed memory above ambition, accountability above appearance, and the authority of the crown above every person who wore it. Charles spoke first. The investigation had found no written order proving that Camilla directly told staff to use his name. Yet the king made clear that her request, combined with the pressure inside her office, had created the conditions for the unauthorized release. The inventory instruction was the official record explaining how the restricted jewel could be handled, and its restoration meant Queen Elizabeth's wishes could no longer be quietly weakened. The consequences followed quickly. Charles removed the household coordinator who had invoked his authority from all ceremonial duties. He also introduced a dual approval rule, meaning two named senior royals would now have to give written permission before any restricted jewel could leave secure custody. The informal verbal system that caused the crisis was finished. The king then signed the final order. Queen Elizabeth's Cartier Tiara would be sealed from ceremonial use and preserved until William and Catherine jointly decided its future within the next generation. Charles understood the weight of that decision. He was not merely locking away diamonds. He was protecting a boundary his mother had deliberately left behind. Camilla accepted the written acknowledgement placed before her. She signed it without argument, admitting responsibility for requesting access, while knowing a restriction existed. The queen consort kept her title and her place beside Charles, but she permanently surrendered any claim to the tiara. William read her acknowledgement and chose restraint. The prince said he would seek no further punishment. His raised hand had never been meant to destroy Camilla. It had been meant to stop a private wish from becoming royal authority, simply because no one felt brave enough to object. Charles looked at them both and delivered the final lesson. The crown could not survive if family loyalty became an excuse for institutional misconduct. The monarch then placed Queen Elizabeth's instruction inside the case himself, finally choosing clarity over avoidance. Anne locked the case and handed the key to Catherine. Camilla watched quietly before giving the princess a restrained nod. Catherine accepted it without triumph, knowing the jewel now carried both the late queen's memory and the painful cost of defending it. William's intervention had done more than stop the order of the Garter. It had ended the quiet erosion of limits within the royal household. Camilla learned that legitimacy could not be claimed through possession. Charles reclaimed authority by enforcing consequences, and the future king proved that protecting the monarchy sometimes requires interrupting its most perfect display. The ceremony had resumed, the tiara had been sealed, and the family had reached its final judgment. No title, marriage, or royal rank would ever again outweigh the wishes entrusted to the crown. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.